A very good day to one and all who've joined the webinar. So I think we're good to begin with our webinar for today, where we're going to see about the different Patch Tuesday updates that have been released by Microsoft for January's Patch Tuesday updates. So before I begin with this webinar, I have a quick little favor to ask from you guys. So if you're able to listen to my voice clearly, if the audio is audible, and if you're able to view the presentation, then please do send in a confirmation via chat. So once I receive a few confirmations, then I will proceed with the webinar. Oh, that was quick. Thank you guys. I've received a few confirmations and I think I'm good to begin this webinar where we're going to see about Patch Tuesday updates from ManageEngine. So this is a 45-minute session and this is the agenda for today's webinar. So first we will see on the different Microsoft's Patch Tuesday updates released for January. So this month has been quite interesting. It's a disastrous start to 2018 with the Meltdown and Spectre security vulnerabilities taking the IT world by storm. So let's see what are the updates that have been released with respect to Meltdown and Spectre mitigation. And then we will see about the updates on critical third-party applications. Then we will see on what will happen, what are the impacts if these patches are not going to be deployed to the computers in your network, say your enterprise network. So we will analyze the possible exploitations. And lastly, we will see how we can defend and secure our network from all these vulnerabilities. We will see the various methods that you could adapt to in order to protect your enterprise devices. And for the benefit of everybody, at the end of the webinar, let us discuss some frequently asked questions regarding the Patch Tuesday updates from Microsoft for the month of January. And if in case you have any queries or questions related to Meltdown and Spectre, then you can just shoot them right to us. I have my expert panel right here with me who will help you in answering your questions in real time. So this is the agenda for today. So what is in the limelight for January's Patch Tuesday updates from Microsoft? As we can clearly see, Meltdown and Spectre are taking the IT world by storm. These security vulnerabilities, these CPU bugs are affecting almost every device that runs on a modern processor. Your Intel processors, your ARM processors, as well as your AMD processors. So as much as I regret telling this, almost every device that you use, from your PCs to your laptops, to your Windows laptops, to your Nexus and Pixel mobile phones, iOS phones, Mac OS, your server machines, workstations, every single, even your cloud services. So every single device that runs on a modern processor is being affected by Meltdown and Spectre. So the rough count might be around 1 billion if you'd ask me. And the upshot of these bugs is that they are going to allow an unprivileged actor, an unprivileged processor to take unprivileged processor is going to have access to the sensitive data in your computer's memory. That is what speculative execution with side channels is all about. So a hacker or an attacker is going to gain access to your computer's memory by exploiting Meltdown and Spectre by taking advantage of speculative execution. As you know, it's one of the most common techniques used by a processor to optimize performance. But little did we know that it came with a security vulnerability, and you can see how many devices are being affected. And most importantly, it affects your hardware, and that is where we're all stuck here. So there has been no proof that these vulnerabilities have been exploited in the wild by malicious actors, but we can never wait for the hackers to exploit them. Instead, we will have to act real quick. So in this webinar, we will see the various updates that Microsoft has released to mitigate the Meltdown and Spectre and discuss about them in detail. So let me give you a very quick recap about 2017. So the total vulnerability updates released by Microsoft comes up to a count of 707. And total critical vulnerability updates released by Microsoft, the critical ones, comes up to a count of 248. And the total OS or applications affected count comes around to 17. And remember, even in our previous webinar, we had discussed about those versions of Windows 10 that are going to the end of life phase. So in March, Microsoft has confirmed an approximate date in March where Windows 10 1607 version will reach the end of life phase, and in September, Windows 10 1703 version is predicted to reach its end of life phase. So make sure all of you guys, all of your admins, make sure that all your devices in your enterprise network that runs on Windows 10 has the up-to-date version installed so that you can stay ahead of any of these news about end of life. So about January's Patch Tuesday, how many patches have been released by Desktop Central? So we have the count 373. Another view for you. We have 7 bulletins, 162 patches, 83 updates, vulnerabilities goes to a count of 59, and the impact created is 8. As usual, we have a lot of information disclosure vulnerabilities this time. So this gives you another view or perception to the patches. So we have categorized them based on their impact. So the first, the one that is topping the list is the remote code execution, and it is predominantly because of the Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities, because they are going to let your hackers access your system's memory only when they are able to remotely execute arbitrary code on the computer machine. And as I said, we have a lot of information disclosure vulnerabilities as well as elevation of privilege vulnerabilities. So this gives you a split on the patches by severity. So this time we have severity rated critical patches accounting for 28.8% and important updates accounting for a percentage of 66.1%. So this gives you a view about the patches by severity. We can see that there are quite a lot of critical updates that needs attention. So when we look at the OSs or applications that have been affected for the month of Jan, we have Microsoft Office topping the list. There's Microsoft Access, and then you have Microsoft SharePoint Server and Microsoft Office Software, Outlook. All of these are accounting for vulnerabilities in the month of Jan, followed by Microsoft Edge, and then we have Windows as well. So these are the list of OSs or applications affected, the list that's been given by Microsoft for the month of January. As I said, your Office is going to include Microsoft Access, Microsoft Outlook for Mac, Microsoft Office software, and even your Microsoft SharePoint server. And coming down to Windows, you have your Windows GDI component that is vulnerable this time, and also all your OSs that are being affected by Meltdown and Spectre. Then we have the browsers of Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer, and even the open source platform for developing applications. You have .NET Framework as well as .NET Core, ASP.NET Core. And the database management system SQL Server is also found vulnerable for Jan. And then Chakra Core, your JavaScripting engine. And like usual, we have the Adobe Flash Player updates as well. So this is the most common OSs or applications that have been affected for the month of Jan. And we have updates given by Microsoft to mitigate or to resolve them. So first, let's see about Microsoft Office. So the updates available for Microsoft Office fall under the severity critical, important, and low. And you can see the various impacts that they can cause. We have an information disclosure vulnerability, again, a remote code execution, and this time we have spoofing as well. So I'm sure you all know what spoofing means. It's to hoax or trick the end user. So we have a spoofing vulnerability this time. So if you look at the components that are being affected, when we're talking about Microsoft Access, so this Microsoft Access is usually sanitizes the inputs to image fields that are edited within the design view. So it's one of the main function is to sanitize these image fields that are edited with this design view. And when this goes improper, when the sanitization of image fields does not happen properly, then there is a cross-site scripting vulnerability occurring with Microsoft Access. And again, we have vulnerabilities that are affecting the component of handling objects in memory. It's again a problem with respect to Microsoft Office software. And then this time with Microsoft Outlook for Mac, there has been a report. There has been an issue reported about the improper handling of email addresses with respect to Microsoft Outlook for Mac. And again, with respect to Microsoft Office, we have the rich text format content, which all of us are aware of. And this handling has also been reported to be improper, allowing for arbitrary code, remote code execution vulnerability in the Microsoft Office software. And then with regards to SharePoint Server, the component that is to be exploited is the sanitization of web requests. So SharePoint Server, as we know, it properly sanitizes the web request that reaches the server. And this time there's found to be an elevation of privilege vulnerability that exists with SharePoint Server when it does not properly sanitize a specially crafted web request to the server. So this is what happens with respect to Microsoft SharePoint Server. And this time for January, Microsoft has released a security as defense in depth measure. So it has given us an update that provides enhanced security as a defense in depth measure for Microsoft Office. So let's look at the possible exploits. These are the list of CVEs that has been reported. And what are the possible exploits if you are not going to deploy updates for your SharePoint server, for your Microsoft Access, for your Microsoft Outlook for Mac, and your Microsoft Office software? So first, as we discussed, was the cross-site scripting vulnerability that exists when Microsoft Access does not properly sanitize the inputs to the image fields that are designed within Design View. So what exactly is going to happen here? An attacker could exploit the vulnerability by sending a specially crafted file to a victim or hosting the file on a web server. And you know that the attacker, once he's going to get access to the victim system, then he can even read sensitive data, or he can inject malicious content in the browser, or he can even use the victim's identity to take actions on a remote site on behalf of the user. So as you know, the exploitations that are associated with cross-site scripting attacks are humongous and they are disastrous. So this is what happens for Microsoft Access cross-site scripting vulnerability. And with respect to Microsoft Office software, since it fails to properly handle the objects in memory, there has been a vulnerability reported in the Microsoft Office software. And it is a remote code execution vulnerability where your actors, malicious actors, are going to get access to the end user system who's currently logged in. And from there, they can launch any kind of malicious attacks. And with respect to MS Outlook for Mac, if you're going to use MS Outlook for Mac, then make sure there's a spoofing vulnerability that exists when Microsoft Outlook does not properly handle the encoding and display of email addresses. So what you have to do is deploy the security update, which is going to correct how Outlook for Mac displays encoded email addresses. So these are the various possible exploitations that can occur when you're not going to deploy the updates that are released by Microsoft for Microsoft Office software. So the next is Microsoft Windows, which we're all very worried about because it carries all the Windows OSs with it. So the severity of these updates fall under important, and these are the different impacts, different vulnerabilities that are created when you're not going to deploy the updates. So coming here, these are the various components that are being affected. As you can see, I was talking to you about the Windows GDI component. This time, there is a vulnerability reported in the Windows GDI component, and it's a Win32K information disclosure vulnerability that exists in the GDI component when it is going to improperly disclose the kernel memory address. So what could an attacker do when such a vulnerability happens, when your Windows GDI component is vulnerable? So an attacker who exploits this vulnerability, he can just obtain information from the user system, from the logged on user system. So he's going to have an unprivileged access to your user system. And this time with respect to Windows, there are a lot of elevation of privilege vulnerabilities. For example, you have an elevation of privilege vulnerability existing in Windows subsystem for Linux and one in Windows SMB server, and even another elevation privilege vulnerability in Windows kernel API. So this time your Windows comes with a lot of elevation of privilege vulnerabilities. And another interesting one is your Windows OSs are being affected by Meltdown Inspector. So in our component at the last, you can find the speculative execution of modern processors that are being affected. So these are the CVEs that are listed, and in the exploitation assessment, if you'd see, because of Meltdown and Spectre, we can expect speculative execution to be taken advantage of, which is going to result in side channel attacks by your hackers or attackers. So I'm pretty sure that with all the news around you, with all the buzz around you, you must be aware of what Meltdown and Spectre are capable of. If not, I will tell it to you in another few slides, in another upcoming slide. So what's the news about Microsoft Edge, one of the browsers of Microsoft for Windows 10? So we have a critical update here released for Microsoft Edge, and these are the various vulnerabilities that are associated with Edge if you're not going to deploy the updates at the right time. So these are the components that are under threat. The scripting engine, as usual, is improperly handling objects in memory. And again, Microsoft Edge is reported to have been affected by Meltdown and Spectre. So none of them actually are getting away from Meltdown and Spectre. And Microsoft Edge has also fallen prey to it. So these are the list of CVEs that have been released with respect to Microsoft Edge vulnerabilities. And these are the possible exploitations that can occur if you're not going to deploy the update. So let's take arbitrary code execution in the context of the user. So a remote code execution vulnerability exists in the way the scripting engine is handling the objects in the memory. So what can this vulnerability do? It can corrupt the memory in such a way that your attacker could execute arbitrary code in the context of the current user. He can even use the same rights as the logged on user. What if the user is going to have administrative access? He can install programs, he can view, change, or delete the data, or even create new accounts with full user rights. You are just going to let him enter your enterprise device if this particular remote code execution vulnerability is not resolved. So what the security update is going to handle, it's going to modify how the scripting engine handles the objects in memory. So these are the other exploitations that are possible since Microsoft Edge has been affected by Meltdown and Spectre. We have speculative execution side channel attacks in the roam if they're going to be exploited by hackers with respect to Meltdown and Spectre. So next about Microsoft Internet Explorer, another browser that's been there for a long time by Microsoft. So it again comes with a critical update. And these are the impacts that are created if you're not going to deploy the security updates for Microsoft Internet Explorer. So what is the component that is under threat? Again, it is scripting engine's improper handling of objects in memory and the speculative execution of modern processors because of Meltdown and Spectre. So these are the list of CVEs, which are very few in number. And again, since the scripting engine is involved here, there's going to be a remote code execution vulnerability. And this is again going to take access of your end user system who's logged in. And then we have the after effects or the impacts of what Spectre and Meltdown can lead us to. It is going to allow an unprivileged processor to gain access to a computer system memory by taking advantage of speculative execution. So we've seen Microsoft Office, we've seen Windows, OSS, we've seen Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer. So next we have .NET Core. So this time .NET Core comes with a denial of service vulnerability and a security feature bypass vulnerability. So these are the components that are under threat. It is about how correctly your .NET and .NET Core applications are handling the XML document processing, and again how it validates the certificate. So these are the components under threat, and you have the list of CVEs here. So what are the exploitations that are possible? So there is a spoofing vulnerability that's going to result in specially crafted requests to .NET applications and unprivileged use of invalid certificates. So the first thing, if you'd see, an attacker who successfully exploits this particular vulnerability, he could cause a denial of service against a .NET application. And with respect to the unprivileged use of invalid certificates, it's a security feature bypass vulnerability. And when does this happen? If an attacker is going to present a certificate that is marked invalid for a specific use, but the component is going to use it for purpose. So when the .NET Core components do not completely validate the certificates, that's when the security feature bypass vulnerability is found to be reported. So these are the exploitations possible for your .NET Core. And we have SQL Server, which has also reported on being affected by Meltdown and Spectra, and we have updates released for them as well. And then we have Adobe Flash Player. So Adobe this time has come up with updates for your Meltdown and Spectre, as well as for its exploitation for the out of bounds remote code execution vulnerability and the information disclosure vulnerability. So that's all for now. So we've seen about the security updates released by Microsoft for Microsoft Office, your Windows, your browsers, your .NET Core, .NET Framework, and then for Adobe as well as SQL Server. Now, these are the list of non-security Office updates that have been released for the month of January. And we would recommend you to not skip the non-security updates as well, because you never know in today's age, in today's year of growing cyber attacks, you never know what is going to come from where and attack you. So it's always better to stay safer on the phases of security as well as non-security updates. And this is a list of third-party updates for Windows. So we have updates for Google Chrome. We have the update for Mozilla Firefox, which is 5704. So this version is the update that's been released by Firefox to fix your Meltdown and Spectre updates. So you can take a note of all these third-party updates released by Windows. Coming down, we also have updates for your Mac. So, since the buzz is all about Meltdown and Spectre, I thought I'll share a few insights or a few steps on how you can mitigate these Meltdown and Spectre security updates in a detailed manner using patch management from ManageEngine. Because as you can see, a lot of tech giants have been deploying, they have been providing you with the updates to mitigate Meltdown and Spectre. In that case, if you see, we have Microsoft providing security updates, we have Mac providing updates, then your Google Cloud Services, Amazon and Azure, all of them have been providing security updates for Meltdown and Spectre. So let's take the example of Microsoft that had released a few security updates on Jan 2017 to mitigate Meltdown and Spectre. So when Microsoft had released these updates, there was a little glitch. There was an issue in the deployment. So Microsoft, using Windows Update, is going to deploy the Spectre and Meltdown security updates to your enterprise devices. But if you're not going to run the compatible antivirus solution, then this resulted in a blue screen error, or say a stop error that is not going to allow your machine to boot. So this was reported by Microsoft as the compatibility issue with antivirus software. So it's very simple. All that you have to know is that only if the antivirus solution in your computer or in your device that is running is up to date with the latest definition update installed, then only Microsoft is going to offer its security updates to be installed. So this is what the compatibility issue has to do with your antivirus and the Microsoft security updates released. So let me show you the list of antivirus applications. So to help prevent these stop errors that were caused by the incompatible antivirus applications, Microsoft has come up with this list. So it gives you the list of all the antivirus applications and a column that says if they have given or not given, if they fixed or not fixed the compatibility update for installing your security updates from Microsoft. So you can refer this link. If you are interested, my team can share the link with you. This is a public link. You will get a list of all the antivirus, and you can know if they've been supporting, if they've given you the fix for Microsoft security updates. So once you have an up-to-date antivirus software in your device, in your enterprise running, then you can install the security updates. But if you're not going to have the latest antivirus, then Microsoft is not going to give you an alert. Instead, it will just not deploy the security update. So you might be standing there out in the wild without knowing if your antivirus is compatible or not. So there needs to be a one solution for it. Your patching also has to be automated, and such issues like this also has to be automated, or at least it should be made easy for you. So for that, I'd like to show you how you can deploy these security updates with ease and resolve all these compatibility issues with patching solutions from ManageEngine. So let me take you to the product view. to show you how I'm going to deploy these updates. See here, I have logged on to Desktop Central. I'm taking Desktop Central as an example, which is an endpoint management solution offered by ManageEngine. So here I have my patch management tab from where I can perform any of the patching operations. So coming down, the best practice that I would recommend you to do is to update your vulnerability database. This vulnerability database holds the details of all the latest patches released by the different vendors, because when you click on update, it is going to synchronize with the central patch repository. So ManageEngine has its very own central patch repository, which holds all the details of the latest patches released by different vendors. We have a dedicated team here who work on all these updates. They keep track of all these updates, test them for their stability, and also release them into the central repository. So once you click on this update now, all the latest details of patches will be up to date in your server. Remember, this is being configured to happen every day, but in situations like this, in an emergency situation like a vulnerability coming in or a ransomware attack happening, I would suggest you to go click on update now so that you have all the security updates available on your server. So let me go to the all patches view to show you all the systems that are missing these Meltdown inspector. Let's say, for example, let's assume I've already scanned my systems and I know what are the systems that are missing the patches of Meltdown inspector. So let me go and search for them. So here you can see all of these patches available for Meltdown inspector are missing on my computers. So all I have to do is click on these and install the patches. So once you install these patches, you can make sure that, so I've selected all the patches available here, and all the machines that are missing on these patches are automatically pre-filled here. So that's the beauty. You have all the patches listed here. You also have all the machines that do not have the patches. The machines that are missing the patches automatically pre-fill for you. So you do not have to go manually find out if the machines are up to date. You do not have to go manually run through reports and find out the machines that are not up to date. Instead, you can just install the patches right from the missing patches view. Come down, one-time job, you just have to click on deploy, and the security updates will be deployed to all the computers that are missing them. And remember, I told you there was this compatibility issue with respect to the antivirus solution that's running on your network. So what you need to do is, once that we have deployed these security updates, you can move to your all patches view, and under applicable patches, you can come to the detail view. Now here, let me search for Spectre and Meltdown. So let me click on go. As you can see, I can see if these security updates are installed or not. So I can see the patch status of each security update. Well and good, the first 3 updates have been installed, but come down, I can find an error message that says unknown error code 15613. So this error code is nothing but it signifies that this particular update is not compatible with your antivirus. As I told you, Microsoft Windows Update is not going to show you an alert. Instead, it will just not deploy the security update for you. So you, as an administrator, are not going to know if the update is compatible with the antivirus or not. Instead, you will be waiting out on the wild, and Microsoft will still be waiting if it does not know if your antivirus is compatible or not. But in the case of Desktop Central, if you'd see, you have an alert showing you that this particular update is not compatible. So what can you do? How quickly can you act? You can go and update your antivirus to the latest definition update, which will set a registry key. And that registry key will be used by Microsoft to identify that, okay, this update is compatible with the antivirus running on this person's device. So that's how Microsoft finds the compatibility. Once you find the alert, you can go update your antivirus and then come back and deploy the security update. So how easy it is if you're going to know which updates are incompatible with the antivirus so that you can make sure that the necessary actions are taken. So this is how you can automate the deployment of security updates as well as resolve such issues that come in times of emergency, because you cannot waste any time when it comes to deploying updates with Spectre and Meltdown, because you know how critical these patches are. So just a quick recap, you update your antivirus, then you detect the systems that are missing them, then you come back and deploy these patches, and then if you would like, you can generate reports. Let me show you how. So here you have an export option, so you can export all of these views as reports in case, say, your top level management, your CEO sees this on the security news headline and he wants to know if the updates for Meltdown Inspector have been installed on the machines or not. So you can very well come to this view and you can download the report and show him how many patches on how many machines have been installed. So we have a lot of other reports available here as well. So this is just one of the quick mitigations that we were able to offer when it comes to Meltdown and Spectre. There are a lot of other scripts that we have released to mitigate the Spectre and Meltdown. We have supported updates for Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, for Linux, Mac, and all of the security updates that have been released so far for Meltdown and Spectre are available for you to patch using ManageEngine's different patching solutions. But as you can see, it has been a very disastrous start to 2018. Right after the new year, we are all dealing with the CPU nightmare. I mean, how many of you as system administrators would have to spend your Christmas and New Year at your office trying to figure out how you can mitigate these affected missions from Spectre and Meltdown? I mean, I know that there has been no malicious exploitation so far, but remember, WannaCry had a patch available in March, but on May 12, 2017, just 1 month gap, all of those patches were not deployed, and on May 12, 2017, hackers had exploited that particular patch released by Microsoft. The same could just happen here if you are going to ignore patching, if you're not going to invest in a solution that's going to let you automate patch deployment. So what you require now is an automated patching solution, because as an administrator, you cannot keep track of all the vulnerabilities that are occurring. You cannot keep track of all the security news, all the data breaches that are happening. You also cannot keep track of the security updates that are released by different vendors then and there. But instead, leave it to us, leave IT to us, because our profession, our vision and mission is to help you deploy these updates. We over here are a dedicated team trying to keep track of all the updates that are being released. And once these updates are released, we test them for their stability and have them available for you to deploy them. So complete automation is what we require in this age of growing cyber attacks, ransomware, and data breaches. So let me show you how one of the best features offered by ManageEngine in terms of patching can be very useful to you, because it's just a one-time set it and forget it kind of patch automation. If you had used automated patch deployment feature, I've now come to the desktop central console. Let me move to patch management. So in the left hand side tab, you will find automate patch deployment. So I think there is a vulnerability database sync going on. So let me see if we have another server where I can show you how how the automated patch deployment works. So I'm logging into the console. Yeah, as you can see, we have a Meltdown Inspector webinar happening. So we have a free workshop conducted for you to know how you can mitigate the Meltdown Inspector bugs. So that's the registration link over here, which you can follow up later after the webinar. So as you can see, let me show you how automated patch deployment works. So I have clicked on automated patch deployment here in the left-hand side navigation. Now here you can find a lot of tasks that have already been created. So let me go and schedule a new task. So here I can schedule a Windows task, a Mac task, as well as a Linux task. So let me click on Windows. As you can see, I can name my task. Coming down, I have different deployment options. So let me go with scan systems, download and deploy the missing patches. So right from my scan, then to my download and then the deployment, all these phases are going to be automated with my automate patch deployment feature. So coming down, you select what kind of applications that you would like to patch. Is it the security updates, non-security updates, or the different service packs, roll-ups, optional updates, and feature packs of Microsoft, and what kind of applications, what kind of third-party updates would you like to deploy based on their severity levels. If you do not want to deploy patches to a particular application, then you can always go and exclude them here. You can just browse, select one of the applications, and then choose to exclude them. Coming down, I have the deployment settings option. So this will help me to customize on how I want to carry out the deployment. When do I want to deploy the patches? Should I or should I not disturb my end users? All of those customizations about reboot policy, about waking my machines if they are asleep on the network. All these customizations can be enabled by using the deployment settings, which I will show in the future, which we will talk in detail about deployment policy. Coming down, I have the scheduler settings. So here I can configure how frequently I want my schedule to happen. If you want to stay safe of all these vulnerabilities that are occurring, I would recommend you to perform this automated patch deployment task every day, because every day this whole process of scanning your computers, finding out all the missing patches, then downloading those missing patches and deploying them to the targets that you select, this whole process will be performed every single day of your routine task. Now, this will be automated and you do not have to perform any manual activity at all, not even 1% of manual activity. If you're going to create one task now and leave it, it is a full, complete set it and forget it automation. If you take the case of Meltdown Inspector, you need not be worried about the updates, because if you had created an automated patch deployment task and selected your scheduler as every day, then as and when we have any Meltdown Inspector updates, they would be deployed to all the computers that you have chosen in your target section. So let me tell you how. So the best I would suggest is to make sure that you run your patch deployment task every day, right from your scan to detection and deployment, and even if you would like to receive reports. Coming down, I can select the targets to whom I want to deploy this automated patch deployment task to. So let me select a target. I can select remote offices, different domains, or organizational units, or custom groups. Let's say I want to deploy only to my group of managers. So you can create a group of managers and deploy the updates to them. Coming down, I have the execution settings. Now, what if a few computers were not live on the network? Due to some network problems or due to some network connectivity, you can make sure that this particular deployment task is retried on all the targets in which it has failed. So you can specify the number of times. So this is just to make sure that you do not have to worry about if the computers do not have the patches installed. You do not have to keep account of them, but instead it will retry the process, and even this is automated. And again, if you would like to receive notifications about the status of deployment when a task finishes or all such notifications, you can specify your mail address here and you will receive timely notifications on the status of the task deployment. So this is about automated patch deployment. You just configure, furnish all of these details once and click on create, and this will now make sure that the whole of your deployment process, the whole of your patching process is automated without you having to perform any manual activity at all. But it does not just stop with complete automation. We have just a few scenarios that you need to know, a few scenarios that administrators are struggling with when it comes to patching. So the first is where they need to test the patches prior to bulk deployment to servers. So when I mean test, I do not mean manually testing it on a few pilot group of test machines in a network, but instead, how easy would it be even if the testing process was automated along with your automated patch deployment task? So that's how easy it is, right? You find out the patches that are missing, you test them automatically on your test group of computers. Once they're tested to be good to go for deployment, then you carry out the deployment in the time that you configure. So this is what ManageEngine can offer to you. So let me show you how you can test the patches. So this is how the workflow works. So you have the list of all missing patches. You choose to test and approve the patches. So you can create test groups. And when you create test groups, it is recommended to create different groups with different OSs so that you can So for example, I have a test group for Mac computers. It's always recommended to include all the versions of Mac so that you know the stability of the patch on different versions as well. This is going to make the task easier for you. So once you create test groups, you can test the patches on these groups, which is automated. And once the patches have been tested and are approved for deployment, they can be taken for deployment during the subsequent APD task. So here in the console, in the left-hand side, you will find the test and approve option. So let me move to Desktop Central. So here under Patch Management, in the left-hand side, you will find the test and approve option. So here we have the approval settings where I've chosen my approve patches for the option of test and approve. So I already have a test group created here. So let me show how it works. So this is the group of test computers that I have to test my patches. So I'm testing all my Windows patches here, all the patches that come under the criteria of security updates with severity levels critical, important, moderate, low, and unrated. So I've selected to test any patch that comes under this category. Here you can see the patches that have been tested, if they have failed or if they are installed on the system. So you have the download status here. Coming down to the system view, you can find all the systems that have the patches. Are they still missing? Have they failed or are they being installed? So in the patch view, you can find the number of patches that have download failed, the number of patches that are not approved for deployment, and the number of patches that are approved for deployment. So this is how the test and approve feature helps you to automatically test the patches that are released that you would like to deploy to your end users by creating a test group, checking if they are good for deployment, and then deploying them to the end machines. Just take the example of deploying critical updates to your servers. You cannot just deploy them, but you need to test and then deploy them. So that is just one scenario that helps you with the test and approve feature. So the next scenario is about where we still have enterprises that are using legacy applications. So let's just take the case of Java. Let's say you have a group of developers in your company who say that the applications are not going to work if you deploy the latest version of Java to them. There might be a few incompatibility issues with Java when it comes to a few applications. So in that case, it is required out of you to not deploy applications to the Java feature. So how are you going to decline such applications? So you can make use of the decline feature option. So here, the left-hand side, you will find the decline patch option. So you can select a group. It is always recommended to create a group. For example, let me select a test group. So now I can select the patches that I would like to decline for these group of computers. So for this group that I have created, I'm going to decline all of these patches. Let me click on save. Now this will make sure that this particular group for which I've declined, for which I've created a decline rule, do not have the patches deployed. For example, you can create a group of computers that involves all your developers who have reported on Java being incompatible with a few applications in your network. So you can go find out Java runtime environment. You can select all the Java applications. You can select them and create a decline rule only for your developers. So this is how the decline patch option is going to work when, for example, say you want to decline patches to a legacy application when you have incompatibility issues. So the next case is where, so this is one of the most important features. As an administrator, you do not want to disturb your end users, because you know that if end users are going to find the notification of a patch being installed, you just skip it. They do not want it to happen. So let's say you want to deploy updates during the non-working hours in your office after all your users have left. So that can be customized. And let's say you do not want to reboot your server machines. When, let's take the case of Meltdown and Spectre updates, you would not like to reboot your server machines as it might be very critical. Then you can customize your reboot policy. Let's say you have a time of say 3 hours to deploy the updates. That's only when you can deploy the Windows updates to your end users. You can configure the deployment window as to when would you like to deploy the Windows updates to the machines, in what time interval. So let me not give you the words alone. Let me show you where we have the deployment policy. So coming down here under settings, you will find deployment policies. So I already have created a few policies. Let me choose create policy. So you can give your policy a name, then you can choose when you would like to initiate the deployment at. Every time a computer is going to start up or during the refresh cycle of say 90 minutes. And then you can choose the preferred week for deployment. Is it the first week or the second week, third, fourth, or last week? Let's say you're deploying only the Microsoft Patch Tuesday updates. So you can go with the second week and maybe choose Thursday, because Tuesday you have the updates released, and then you can wait for Wednesday for the stability to be confirmed. And then on Thursday, you can deploy the updates. Coming down, you have the deployment window. Here, you specify the time interval as to from when to when do you want the deployment to happen. Let's say I've given the entire day for the deployment. So anytime there are critical updates found, then these updates will be deployed. So the deployment window is the time interval for your patches to be deployed. And in the case of Meltdown Inspector, if you have to immediately deploy these updates, and let's say there are a few computers that are not awake on your network, so you can make use of the Wake on LAN feature. You can turn on computers before the deployment, and coming down, you can also notify your users about deployment. It is always a good practice to tell your users that a deployment is happening, and if you are in the middle of something serious or business critical, then you can go and choose to skip the deployment. So here I have allowed users to skip deployment. Coming down, I can force the deployment after say X days from the day of deployment. Or I can continue to carry out the deployment if the system is idle. So all of these features have been specially crafted to meet your patching requirements. So let's say you have a user who skipped the deployment and maybe his system is found idle for the next 30 minutes, then you can go and carry out with the deployment. So that's how customizable it is to notify your users about a deployment with a message as well. And we were talking about the reboot policy. So let me click on reboot. So this works for reboot and shutdown as well. It's always critical to reboot your server machine. So in case of any deployment, you can choose to exclude your servers from reboot. And then we have different reboot methods. Would you like to force a reboot on a computer? Because this computer is being affected by a vulnerability. I have to immediately deploy the vulnerabilities patch. And only if I deploy them, only if I'm going to reboot, the patch is going to work. In such cases, you can make use of the force reboot option. Or else, if you do not want to disturb your end users, you can choose to postpone the reboot and then force the reboot, say, after X number of days. So your reboot policy is also customizable. So we need to provide customization so that you can feel that you are ahead of the patching. You must have confidence in what is being patched and how is it being patched without affecting the devices in your network or also meeting all your patching requirements. Your enterprise might have different requirements with respect to security and patching. So these deployment policies, you can create any number of deployment policies and you can use to customize how you want the installation and reboot to happen. So with all of these requirements in mind, please remember there are a lot of cyber attacks occurring and you need to make sure that an automated patching solution will help you deploy all these updates without you having to perform anything manually. You need not keep track of the updates. We keep track of the updates and we automatically install it on your machines that you choose as your target. So with all of these requirements in mind, with automation as on the checklist and with multiple OSs support on the checklist, with different third-party applications on the checklist, because even vulnerabilities are rising with respect to your third party, and with the need to test the patches before deploying, all of these requirements are on our checklist, and with these on our mind, we at ManageEngine have provided 4 different flavors of patching for you. So the first is Desktop Central, which is a complete endpoint management suite which comes with different endpoint management features from software deployment to remote control, asset management, your reporting, your system tools, and patch management. And then Desktop Central MSP comes as an endpoint management suite for service providers, say for managed service providers. And we have Patch Manager Plus, which is a point product for patch management. Is your enterprise looking at a solution that wants to deploy patches across Windows, Mac, Linux, and around 300 plus third-party applications? automatically, then Patch Manager Plus is the right tool for you. And we have a good news. Patch Manager Plus on cloud is also ready for release. It'll be available in another couple of weeks, I promise. And then we have Patch Connect Plus. A few of you might have signed a few of your enterprises might have signed a deal with SECM or say WSUS. In that case, you are not going to have an option to deploy third-party applications. That is when Patch Connect Plus can come in handy to you. It is an add-on to your SECM environment, no additional infrastructure required, no additional learning curve required, just an add-on to your patch, just an add-on to your SECM environment, and you can start deploy the third-party applications right from SECM. So these are the 4 different flavors of patch management that is available for you. And this is to make sure that your network is 100% secure and all the time patched, because we know that 2018 is really going to be a bad, risky, and an expensive year for IT. So if you have any questions regarding the updates released by Microsoft with respect to January's Patch Tuesday, or if you have any queries about Meltdown and Spectre, are you worried if they're going to affect your systems? Are you worried if your systems have already been exploited? Or do you think there are certain queries that you would like to ask regarding these vulnerabilities on how to resolve them? You can post your questions in chat and we will answer them immediately. So as I said, we have a workshop from ManageEngine, a free workshop where we teach you how to mitigate the Meltdown and Spectre updates, because we have come up with a lot of mitigation methods, be it the security updates or be it the alerts that we have for compatibility issues. We even have a specific report with respect to Meltdown and Spectre, a report specifically developed for Meltdown and Spectre showing you all the updates that have been released by different vendors and how vulnerable they are. So all these features that are available for you to make sure that your devices are secure from Meltdown and Spectre, you can catch hold of those interesting news in this workshop. So it's scheduled to happen on 17th January 2018 at the time zone of 10:30 a.m. GST. So if you'd like a webinar, if you found these updates and all these news about Meltdown and Spectre to be useful, then please do send in your rating via the survey that you will receive at the end of the webinar, where 1 you see is bad and 5 is going to be a happy one. So thank you all for your active participation. So January's Patch Tuesday updates do not have very much apart from the Meltdown and Spectre security updates. If you have any queries, we're here to help you. Thank you all again for your participation, and you all have a very good day today.